Buonasera. Benvenuti a tutte e tutti. Good afternoon. Welcome to Oxford. I am Andrea Ruggeri, Professor of Political Science here at the University of Oxford, and I had the pleasure and honor to introduce this evening. Today we met at Oxford to reflect on the history of Italy. We spent our afternoon and our early morning with several terrific academics. Tonight we're going to have two amazing roundtables. Unfortunately, Lord Patten, our Chancellor, cannot be with us. He's very sorry about this, and he wishes all the best for this event. So we're going to have two roundtables about reflection on Italy Republic. The two roundtables will be moderated by Bill Emmott. Bill is a former editor-in-chief of The Economist and chairman of the trustees of International Institute for Strategic Studies. He has written 14 books, including Good Italy, Bad Italy, published by Rizzoli at Yale University Press, and worked on two documentaries, feature films broadcast by BBC, Sky Italia, and other major media outlets. He writes regularly columns on international affairs for La Stampa and also written for The Times, The Guardian, Prospect, and the Financial Times. He has been a member of the advisory board of the Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism, a visiting fellow in practice at Blavatsky School of Government at Oxford, and a visiting fellow at All Souls College. He is an honorary fellow of Magdalen College at Oxford. Thanks, Bill, for accepting to moderate and navigate us with these two terrific roundtables, and I leave you the floor. Thank you very much.
So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to ask my first of two panels. The first panel will be reflecting on today in the light of the last 77 years since the inaugural lecture given in 1947 by Alessandro Passerin d'Andrève, Reflections on Italy. The first panel will use history to look at today. The second panel will use history and today to look at the future. So try and tell those two apart, because none of us know the future and not all of us know about today. But the ones who do know about today are definitely my first panel. I'm going to call them up to the stage. First of all, Natalia Augias, who is London Bureau Chief for RAI, has previously been a political editor for RAI in Rome. Natalia, come to the stage. Welcome. Secondly, Chiara Albanese, who is Bloomberg political writer, can I call you, in Rome now. And you've also written for the Wall Street Journal, I know, and many other things. Please, Chiara Albanese. Thirdly, Giovanna Pancheri, who is for Sky News, presents their morning show called Start, and has formerly been in Brussels as a foreign correspondent and in Washington. New York. And last but not least, my old friend Beppe Severgnini, who has too long a CV to read out, but Corriere della Sera, formerly was an Italy correspondent for The Economist. His latest book, and he also had a TV show called L'erba dei vicini, loosely translated, The Grass is Greener. So, and he very kindly had me on that. And his latest book is called Italian Lessons, 50 Things We Know About Life Now, which is sort of perfect for today's discussion. So, what I want to do, Alessandro Passerin d'Andrève was writing just after the Second World War, just after the end of fascism. Here we have in Italy now the first prime minister who comes from a party that grew out of the post-fascist movement. And as a result of that and the general complexion of this party, I think that people find it difficult to work out how to label what the new government is. And I want to, my former magazine in their latest issue called the Meloni government hard right. Other people call it neo-fascist, other people simply say center-right, other people say conservative. So which should it be? What would Passerin Dontrev have thought about this? That's my first topic, and I'm going to ask Giovanna Pancheri to start.
Thank you, and buonasera, everyone. Thank you for having me here. And I think this is the most difficult question, because maybe Meloni herself, she doesn't know how to answer right now. If you go back to Meloni before the election, like her book, Io sono Giorgia, I am Georgia, that was written in 2021, I think that we could define Giorgia Meloni as the leader of an hard-right movement. In that book, we have pro-Trump position, very Christian values put forward, a very strong position against immigration, against civil and social rights. But then government comes, and things, you know, when you have power in your hands, get to change. And I don't know how you can define her right now, because when it comes to international politics, when it comes to European tables, yes, she's the one that say no to the European Stability Mechanism, but at the same time, she accepts the new Stability and Growth Pact, which is even less convenient for certain point of the control and the check and balances than the new European Stability Mechanism. At the same time, she tried to project herself as a leader that can discuss with Africa. We just have seen in Rome this important summit between Italy and Africa, but she is still very strong on migration on a normal declaration. And you see what happened. I think all of you have seen the horrible images of a few weeks ago in front of Acca Larenzia for this commemoration where 2,000 people gather and start to do what they always do every year, actually, and this Roman salute that makes the tour of the world. And she never said a word so far about it. And I think that she's still afraid of losing this part of voters that rely on her since the beginning, the one that look at the flame, the symbol of Fratelli d'Italia, and still feel something of nostalgic. But she also has to, want to project herself. As an Italian, I would like to say Margaret Thatcher. So as a leader of a conservative movement who is mature enough also to lead at European level. I think she's still living in herself this struggle, and she doesn't know the question to this answer, so why should I?
This one should say is the university that decided to deny, or at least lobbied to deny Margaret Thatcher an honorary doctorate at Oxford University. Natalia, you are covering Britain.
Covering Britain.
Which is more hard right? Rishi Sunak's government or Giorgia Meloni?
There is quite a good relationship between the two, actually.
I know.
And it's quite impressive to watch because they seem to be very intimate. They talk to each other. They share some values. They share some policies. I think the Rwanda scheme is something that is interesting to Italy. Italy is trying to has struck a deal with Albania. It's a different kind of setup, but that's the idea, you outsource your problem. And Rishi Sunak, of course, went to Giorgia Meloni's party conference at Reyu. Yes. Which was unexpected, I think, for the British public. It got a lot of publicity on papers.
We just thought he wanted a holiday.
Yeah, vacanze romane.
He wanted to be with people who liked him, which is not true in his own party.
And it was a big plus for Giorgia Meloni, of course, because what the opposition tells her is that she's isolated, she's too far right, she's so far right that no European politician, and especially, France and Germany won't really have anything to do with her, and then there she was presenting Rishi Sunak right next to her. So I don't know if you would describe Sunak as far right, because he has problems within his party, obviously, but Giorgia Meloni, I think Giovanna is right. She is hard to define, but I think that she has an advantage in being hard to define because she has positioned herself in such a way that whatever happens in Europe, and then of course, you know, with the big elections in the States, she is able to, you know, face and be, you know, and address anybody on the other side, whatever happens. If it's Trump, she knows Trump. She went to the CPAC. She has very strong relations. She invited Steve Bannon to her party conferences, you know, when she was the hard right opposition leader. But she's also, as Giovanna said rightly, described herself as il leader del partito conservatore, the head of the conservative party that Italy never really has had. It was supposed to be Berlusconi, but he never quite managed that. He was a lot of things, but non il leader del partito conservatore.
No, I suppose that's, yes, he was certainly many things, there's no doubt about that. But Beppe, so let me ask you, so when Passerin Dontrev gave his lecture, it was, as he indicated in that lecture and as our discussion said, Italy was seen as a rather polarized society, with even fears of conflict continuing, so forth. Today is one of your Italian lessons that labels no longer matter, that in a way all Italians are conservatives?
No, not really. Giorgia Meloni, neo-fascist, no longer. Conservative, not yet. Hard right, not really. It's a right-wing prime minister who's deciding what to do next and what she's going to be. In Italian we say cosa farà da grande, to decide what she will be and what she will do when she grows up, politically and personally, in the next year. What am I going to do? It's a fact that she changed her mind about the 3-4 most important things about my country, our country, many Italians in the room, and the ambassador is here. I'm sure he remembers, in Venice, we were together. There was a minister for agriculture who happens to be a brother-in-law, but that's...
brother-in-law of Meloni rather than Ambassador Lambertini.
No, I said her brother, her brother-in-law. And I said, look, Minister Lollobrigida, I'm so happy that your Prime Minister, I didn't say sua cognata, I said our Prime Minister, you and many other in Fratelli Italia, that you change your mind about Europe, European Union, about Trump, about Putin, how important is that? Most important. Just tell me, when was the moment when, you know, you saw the light, like St. Paul, yes. Like I said in Italian, momento damasceno, the moment you actually saw that, and he said, no, we really never change our mind. I said, okay. And then I reminded him, and I'll do it again, that on YouTube, you can easily find it, June 23rd, 2016, Brexit night. I was in London, live TV. The guest was Onorevole Giorgia Meloni, and she was telling me how wonderful it was that Britain could leave the European Union. There was like a cage for us all, and it was. And I said, no. First of all, how much? There was a lovely moment when I asked her. Sorry, you should never, journalists ask those questions. I asked her, Prime Minister, when were you last in England? And she said. Is everything online? You can find it. And she said, well, I was in Dublin 2 years ago. And I said, we have a problem. I said, I was in Glasgow. Even Glasgow. I said, England. Anyway, no, it happens. And it was a slip of tongue. That thing happened. But
that's right, but I'm
so glad, and I'll stop here, that Giorgia Meloni was a younger woman and a less experienced politician, changed her mind. In fact, today, on all those issues, she would say exactly what I say, and I'm so pleased that I was one of the journalists sort of admiring his style of leadership at The Economist, that our economy, because once an economist man, always an
always.
You told me that.
You're in the family.
Okay, The Economist last week said, Europe has got many problems. At the moment, Italy is not one of them. It's a fact. So why shouldn't, but she has to decide what to do next. But I will talk about this, I'm sure, so I'll stop here. What she say or doesn't say about fascism, about some scene we've seen in Acca and elsewhere, about some of the people around her, is still worrying. So we should be very careful and keep our guard. But to be open-minded and to be fair, I think it's important, even for journalists.
Absolutely, even for journalists. Now, Chiara, I mean, she, just staying with this government, and then we'll move on to the evolution of politics generally. I mean, one characteristic of this government is that it has been like more moderate on some of these international affairs than some people have said, if depending on your definition of moderate, but has actually been rather socially conservative, I mean, or right-wing, or whatever one wants to call it. Obviously, that doesn't cost money, so therefore you can do that without borrowing money to deny surrogacy and things like that. How do you see that evolving? Is that something that for this government, for Giorgia Meloni, is going to be a theme for the coming years? Or has she sort of, do you think, served the base that she thinks she needs to serve by doing the things that she's done? How does that?
So first of all, thanks for the invitation, and thanks. It's great to talk about Italian politics in the UK with like so many people attending, because the issue with Giorgia Meloni and with her government is that there is so much curiosity. Like, for the first time in like several governments, and I mean, we can say we had a few that have been rotating, there is like a genuine curiosity about how to label her, how to define her, what she thinks and what she does. And I totally agree with what has been said. Like, you don't go on YouTube because you're going to find things about Giorgia Meloni that you would never imagine. Like Trump moments, Russia moments, even some vulgar moments. She's a different person now. And that also includes civil rights and LGBTQ issues and surrogacy in a way. So there was the night in which she was elected, and it's interesting because like we were in the newsroom in Rome covering the elections, and all of a sudden some colleagues just yell, "Look at the pound! Look at the pound!" And like, so it was a UK story. So Liz Truss' budget had just been announced, and so the pound was collapsing, and in that moment, Meloni really realized that what she's actually doing as a leader is very different than what she's doing as a campaigner. And this is where a lot of what we're discussing and seeing now comes from, right? She knows that what she does in power is different. And the same applies to civil rights. So when she came to power, like a lot of communities were worried about what action she would have taken, right? Even on abortion or like social rights and civil rights. Actually, she's not done anything. She has done like some bold statements on the campaign, like surrogacy, for example.
And universal crime for the surrogacy.
Yeah, the universal crime, I mean, honestly, it's such a random thing. Like, can you really kind of go and punish surrogacy as a universal crime, prosecuting people abroad? Like, how do you even define that? How do you actually do that? What is the Italian policeman gonna do? Like, are they flying to the US and looking, what is that? It's just pure
politics.
Propaganda, because I mean, it's already legal in Italy, like, it's hard to kind of, but on other civil rights, she's not done anything. And I'm saying that after having authored like several articles saying there is concern among families, there is concerns among communities. But then if you go back, and colleagues, even in London, I was here in our offices for a couple of days, and people asked me, so how is it going on the social rights? You wrote about it, do you want to follow up? And it's like, nothing has happened. She has changed. I don't know if she's changed her mind, but she's definitely adopted her attitude also on that. And it is very interesting to see how this transition has been pervasive on whole that she's done. Foreign policy for sure, domestic policy for sure, social rights as well.
Thank you. So I mean, now the picture we're painting is of this very conventional, rather moderate, rather steady politics, if you like, and that's not what many of us associate with Italy in all sorts of ways over decades, really, of reading about La Casta, the terrible things done by the political establishment, the rise of the Five-Star movement and the Waffa movement, and the Waffa election, and as it was described, I shan't even translate for those who, this is a family audience, and rotomazione on Renzi, everything was to be destroyed and so forth. So is that phase of Italian anti-politics over? One finds it hard in the context of a very populist environment internationally to believe that it could be over, but is this going to mean Italy is settling down? Beppe, what do you think? I mean, is this...
Things are changing. I think fewer Italians are voting, which is a problem. In Italy, we had the percentage of people voting were always higher than in other countries. It's not a good sign. It didn't start now, but it's going down. A lot of people younger people are not interested in politics at all, and if there are, quite a few are extremists. You see them in the street clashing or doing like fascist sign on the one hand, on the other hand praising Hamas, which I found is something ghastly that happened last Saturday, and so on. So that kind of passion in politics, I don't like. I could do without. The healthy passion, interest in politics in your country is sort of dwindling, it's a fact, and it's worrying. I think this Italian center-left, the Italian left should really do something about it. I mean, we have two parties, as you all know. We have the Democratic Party and the Five-Star Movement, and the Five-Star Movement hasn't decided what it is and who they are. Conte was asked by a colleague the other day on television. Giuseppe Conte is a leader of the Five-Star Movement, and he was asked, would you vote for Trump or Biden? And he said, well, I don't know, I must see. Can you imagine? Is he a left-wing leader of the future? Elish Line, she's young. So the left has got a lot of a role, and an important one in the future, because Giorgia Meloni, for her own good and our own good, she needs a solid opposition. Opposition is healthy. Democracy is when you go to bed the night of the election, and if the other party, the one you have not voted, has won, you're going to sleep at night, because you know that your country is going to... That's democracy to me.
Yes.
I mean, if you go to bed and you're desperate because, what is going to happen tomorrow? That's not democracy. That's why I'm worried about our American friends. In Italy, we should create that situation where once in government, people moderate and sort of tend toward the center. But just one more thing quickly. Italians, we love to puzzle the world and foreigners who think they know about us, and they...
You need to be mysterious. You want to be mysterious. I was writing
for the New York Times as an op-ed contributor for the 8 years, 2013, 2021. And right in between 2018, you remember the Five-Star Movement won big. And I remember my colleagues saying, okay, that's it. And Italy is going to leave the European Union because they said so. We're going to leave the euro, leave the European Union. That's it. And can you write the obituary of... Hold on, wait. Or when Salvini joined forces with the Five-Star, it's over. This is definitely over. It's the end of Europe, it's the end of... Wait. And I was right.
Well, absolutely.
And before you pass judgment of it, wait.
Now, if you descend from heaven or from Oxford or anywhere, and you look at 77 years of post-war history, and you say, well, what kind of political leaders does Italy have? The answer would be usually Christian Democrats, center-right, or central bankers. From Luigi Einaudi through Carlo Azeglio Ciampi, Lamberto Dini, to Mario Draghi, but also, obviously, very strongly. Why does Italy like central bankers so much? Maybe we should start with that, Giovanna.
That's a good question. Maybe because they're not casta. No, that's not their answer. No, listen. I have to say that Einaudi and Ciampi have something that Draghi missed. They went also to the Quirinale. And,
yes.
Of course, this is something that
he's missed so far.
Never say never. I don't know. I think is more headed to Brussels, but we'll see. But anyway, is the fact that maybe the central banker used to be is always has been an institution with an inside school. That works in a very proper way and that prepare men for the institution, men and women for the institution. And when happened that Italy has a moment of confusion and crisis that happened quite often in our country in the past year after the wars, rely to a figure with this kind of experience that knows very well how mechanism works, especially the complex mechanism of Italian budget and finance and debt. There you can find some of the best men and women, and still now, I think Bank of Italy has always the expression of some of the best men and women in general, not just as an economist. And of course, one thing that I found very interesting right now when we do, as having a political show, we run polls every week. And we run polls about the popularity of the main leaders. And Sergio Mattarella, which is our president of the Republic, is always ahead, of course, and then you have the political leaders. But we are not putting we never put Mario Draghi. Mario Draghi, even if he's not anymore the prime minister, is still, after President Mattarella, the person more popular in Italy. And this
is that right?
This is part of the Italian contradiction, You were saying if you was an alien coming right now, and, I can say to this alien, look, the most famous rock band in the world is Italian, has four kids from not Liverpool but Rome. It's the Maneskin, and we have a woman prime minister. The leader of opposition is another woman, and she's gay. You think, oh my God, what a progressive country we do have here. Actually, things in Italy are not just black and white, but can be with different shadows. And the figure of a central banker, I think, is someone that can reassure. But I have to say that maybe this habit is going to change and it's going to stop if the institutional and constitutional reform that President Meloni wants to put forward will pass. And this is another question.
Well, we'll come to that. Okay, constitutional reform. But let me ask first, Chiara, in his lecture in 1947, Passerin d'Entrèves finished by talking about what he described as the problem of religion and fearing and the need to ensure the separation between the Catholic Church and the Vatican and the state, so forth. Is there still a problem of religion in Italy, or is religion now clearly totally separated? How should we think about the Catholic Church?
First of all, I think, we all deserve a round of applause for having kind of spoken about Italy without mentioning religion for like half an hour.
Without mentioning it for half an hour. Well, that's just... Well, that's because I'm a secular Englishman, you see.
So yesterday, there was a conversation because the Argentinian president, Milei, is coming to Rome soon. And so he's going to meet Meloni and the Pope. And so some colleagues in Argentina were saying, we should write a profile about the similarities between Milei and the Pope. And I was like, okay. And apparently they both kind of go against the current in several ways. And we could say that this Pope has been also going against the current in several ways, including families' values, LGBT rights, and so on. But there is also something that is interesting about the current dynamic between the church and the government, and that Meloni has been somehow very independent in the management of her affairs. While everyone says that she's in great alignment with the Pope and with the President as well, so the Quirinale, there is this sort of axis that crosses Rome from one side to the other. At the same time, she's not made religion, and definitely she's religious. Like we know, Giovanna was mentioning earlier her book, like she has said several times, I'm a Christian, I'm a mother, I'm a woman, and so on. She's not put religion at the center of her message. And I think that is also something that is appealing Italians, because definitely the double relation with religion, like everyone kind of feels religious culturally, but not in like the daily life or like most of Italians, I think is very welcome and refreshing for several voters and people that like her, that she has not been referring too often to religion as one of her values in the daily decisions that she announces.
Right, so the influence over the government, I mean, during the Berlusconi period, one certainly thought that the Catholic Church had influence over the government, I think. I mean, over some of the kind of bioethical issues, and clearly, and they wanted to protect their own things. But that is definitely stopped, at least as far as this government is concerned, which is very interesting. So,
I think there is kind of a silent alignment on things.
Right.
Like there's not a going against, also because, I mean, honestly, they're aligned on several aspects, but there is not using religion as a message.
now, of course, Berlusconi's real religion was television. So I'm going to ask Natalia about television and the media. I mean, we see the evolution of the relationship between politics and the media over these decades that the conference has been looking at, sometimes very divided up in that way between the different parties with the subsidies for newspapers, sometimes dominated by Berlusconi because he owned everything. How would you characterize it now?
It's not a happy story.
Not a happy story.
No,
okay.
it's not. Because, well, you know, during Berlusconi's era, especially the scene for Italian television was, you know, there was Rai, and then there was Mediaset, and then there was practically very little else, because that was the sort of tacit pact between the two. And Berlusconi was very heavy-handed on Rai. So that's where we started. And the political control on Rai has become more and more through the years. I think Renzi's reform didn't help. And it's something that is really killing Rai. And it's heavy-handed now, and I can't deny it.
Heavy-handed, right.
Yes. Mm-hmm. But it has been like that, and it would have been like that, I think, if another party would have been in power. It wasn't like that during Draghi, during the Draghi government, a year and 8 months, in which we had to be, I was the head of political news in TG1, which is the main channel, and there was a lot of pressure from all the parties in the government, because they were all in government, except for Meloni, who was in the opposition, because they all wanted their space. You know, they were like sort of stuck in a tiny space, and they all wanted to speak for every edition, except for the government, the prime minister, and the staff from Palazzo Chigi. You know,
he wanted to stay in his monastery.
Hands off.
Yes.
It was amazing. I've been in Rai for 30 years. It's never been like that. Maybe, you know, at the beginning they said it's to do with the fact that Draghi was a central banker and not a politician, so he doesn't know the ways that politicians have with the public television. I think it was a mixture of things, but it certainly wasn't his style. And Rai was a lot easier. I mean, I don't know from the management point of view, but certainly from the news point of view, it was a lot easier to manage it. At present, I think politics is pervasive. And it's a problem. It's a problem because, of course, it affects everything within, you know, national television, which is everybody's television. It's not the government, it's not the political parties, it's everybody's. Because it affects the way people are chosen, or they're discarded, the way careers develop or don't, the way programs are devised, and of course, in the case of this government, people maybe overreacted or maybe didn't. I think Lucia Annunziata want to speak about it maybe later, because of course she was one of the protagonists of RAI for many years. She was the president of RAI.
I definitely don't think Lucia will be shy to talk about this.
And a lot of people moved away immediately. People who were not sort of full-time employees moved away, saying, you know, we're not going to deal with something like this. Maybe it was an overreaction, I don't know. I would say that the situation is not a good situation for RAI.
Beppe, how do you see more broadly than RAI? I mean, all countries have arguments about particularly public television. As you know, Britain is deep in them right now. But broadly, how is the media related to politics now in your feeling in Italy? Is it more plural now than it has been in perhaps over the last 10, 20 years? You know, you've got new owners, you've got, your owner also has La Sette, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, for example.
The owner of Corriere della Sera has La Sette. There are more players, which helps. It's a fact there are also new channels like Fabio Fazio moved. We have Channel 8, which matters now. It was almost non-existent until a couple of years ago. 9 is also moving, La Sette. You have to remember that the number 4, 5, and 6 on the remote belong to Mediaset, that is Berlusconi. It is true that after Berlusconi, now that has passed away, I think the family and the whole, they changed the style, and still you can see that, you know, where they're coming from. So in fact, the right has a kind of stronghold on television on the whole. But it's a fact that I have to say, but I'm not answering your question. I realize I'm more worried about, you know, the usual social network and AI and all that is coming, and it's not something that I remember when Berlusconi was in power. But I wrote a book about Berlusconi and about.
Was it La Pancia degli Italiani?
La Pancia degli Italiani, mamma mia.
Yes.
Berlusconi explained for posterity and friends abroad. That was the time. And that was the issue.
Yeah.
That, of course, lots of people on the right would say, no, come on, this message is not important. People, you know, more, you can own television and still lose an election. And say, yes, but if you don't control television, you lose sooner and you won't come back, for example. Now, I mean, I appreciate what Natalia said. It's very honest, and it's exactly the impression from the outside. I also had a few programs years back for RAI, but I have not heard or Lucia's experience with RAI, so it's better to listen to them and trust them. But it's a problem, but less than 20 years ago. It's unpleasant. Can I use that word? It's unpleasant. The whole thing sort of doesn't smell good. It's not good.
But you're right to focus, to remind us of the importance of social media and of all of the disinformation questions, which are shared across everywhere.
Of course.
Now let's just, in our last few minutes in this panel, I want to move to a political issue, migration. Andrea Ruggeri showed us a chart at the first session this morning, which showed the balance of emigration and immigration, which of course, now you have 9% of residents of Italy are now born in foreign countries, so suddenly transformed really the presence of foreigners. But also at the same time, you have that probably 10% of the population of Oxford is Italian. Yeah. I mean that you have very much a fuga dei cervelli.
Unfortunately,
yes. Yes, exactly. So at least particularly of graduates. Giovanna, how do you see this balance? How is it evolving?
Look, on this issue, the government was supposed to do something at the beginning. Actually, they did in the first budget law. That was also written a little bit by Draghi because it was, the election were in September, and there was this intervention on fiscal incentive for people that wants to come back from abroad that were absolutely very, very convenient. But unfortunately, a little bit of those in the last budget law, but maybe Chiara knows better better than I do for sure, has been removed. And I think that was something, and it is an issue that this government is very in mind. And but you have to cope with the fact that Italy, and it's not fault of this government, it's lacking since years competitiveness. The wage are too low. They didn't grow up compared to other European countries in the past 10 years. The job opportunity for young professionals are what they are, and this is not the best moment to spend budget money to help people to come back when you cannot even help your own people inside. So it's a very big issue, and it copes also with the moment in which, on the other hand, immigration, that was one of the main issues during the electoral campaign for Meloni. It's seeing an important number of arrivals, more than 150,000 arrivals in just 2023, and she's trying to find a solution that doesn't seems too much, how can I say, in contradiction with electoral ideas. So the agreement with Albania, it's a typical electoral move, something that she wants to do for the European election, but actually it's nothing because it's just few people that we can move. She's trying, and this I think is a genuine effort to move all Europe to have more bilateral agreement with the country of origin. She's trying hard with Tunisia, but she has, contradiction inside the EU and also some European allies that doesn't help in this behalf. And I think that migration is going to be one of the issues that she will have to really think about it when it comes to the vote and the moment of the European election and also afterwards. So I'm waiting for her to do something a little bit stronger, because she herself, she recognized this is one of the issues in which she's very disappointed so far by the action of her own government.
But she's been relatively positive about legal immigration, has she not? I mean, there's
yes, also because we also have a huge need of legal immigration in sectors like agriculture, industry. When it comes for the talent to come back, what can I say? We are talking with young Italian that, of course, all of us hope that they will come back. Me, myself, I was abroad for 11 years, and I have to tell you, even though I'm sure that now you're very convinced that this is the country of your dream and that you're living in the moment of your life, there's going to be a moment in which you will really, really be nostalgic about Italy, and you will try the way to come back. And I hope that in this moment, the country will give you the right opportunity to do. And even though, the importance that they're going to bring the name of our country high level also abroad, as an young Italian has just done, and young Italian living in Monte Carlo, Yannick Sinner,
Yes.
So it's not a problem of just brain, but also sportive talent that maybe cannot have this kind of recognition that they would like to have in Italy, but they still bring forward the name of our country abroad. So I'm not so negative about the fact that we are so many young and brave Italians abroad. And,
Good. And Chiara, last word to you. I mean, is immigration, is it going to, 9% is still not a high level by European standards of foreign-born residents, but it's still been a rapid movement. Maybe it'll continue to go up. I live in Ireland, where it has similarly been a sudden move from zero to a large number, actually larger than that. And I can say, since you want me to mention religion as often as possible, I can tell you that the only source of new priests in the Catholic Church in Ireland are Poland and Nigeria. Essentially. I exaggerate slightly, but that's basically true. Is immigration going to change, if we look ahead 10 years or 15 years in Italy, will Italy feel a different country with a higher level of immigration, legal immigration?
I don't have an answer to your question, which is great, but I've got 3 elements to leave to the audience. It's the fact that the topic of migration has got 3 legs. The first is the political propaganda. everyone, it's a convenient topic because everyone deep inside has got some concerns about migration, the left, the right. It's, how we say in Italy, bipartisan. And everyone kind of like shares some of the feeling of like the people that are coming to get our jobs. So it's easy to appeal to migration, and it's also cheap because just blunting out against migration is free. The second thing against migration is that it is impossible to actually stop, as we know in Italy, but also extremely complex to stop. Like one of the ideas, supposedly new ideas of this government is like, let's help Africa so that people don't leave. And we know that this it is completely nonsense to just expect that by giving money to Libya, people are just going to stay there because they are having a different lifestyle, right?
This was, to some extent, the policy of Federica Mogherini when she was European High Representative.
Everyone tried, the left, the right. It's not...
Niti,
yeah,
it was
left.
Yeah.
It's not a new idea, it's not a right-wing idea, it's just an idea. And the third is that Italy needs migration because we need humans to do jobs because the population is aging and we don't have people and skilled people that are doing jobs from picking fruits to actually curing and staffing hospitals. So while there are the first two elements of migration, which is like, we can talk a lot about it, we don't have fixes for it, we also need people to come. So it is a very complex issue with a lot of things feeding into it, so we always need to have very open-minded lenses when we read about migration statements.
But can I say something?
Yes, please, and then...
we haven't solved the problem on how to integrate people. We haven't got the Ius Soli, which is a law that is stuck there in Parliament and it's not passing, and it's not going to pass.
This is to do with citizenship if you were born in...
Yeah, if you're born in the country.
If you're born in the country.
Which is absurd. It's absurd, because it would be helpful, it would make it easier for people to integrate, it will make the whole issue a lot clearer and more straightforward. And we need migration. That's the end of the story. We need migration. We need to control it. We need to know who's coming in. We need to make them an Italian citizen eventually, especially the generation that is born in Italy. And it's absolutely nonsensical that we are stuck there, and it's ideological.
Well said. Well, look. I'm running out of time. I'd love to carry on with this conversation, but I'm going to switch panels where we will talk again about aging and demography. We will talk about Europe. We will talk about the Constitution. You've all been waiting for that, I know. But let me very warmly thank Natalia Augias, Chiara Albanese, Giovanna Pancheri, and Beppe Severgnini, my friend. Thank you.
Bravo, Bill.
Closer to your lips.
Sometimes you turn around. Okay. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So for our next panel, I'm going to call them up. Timothy Garton Ash, well known in this town. Isaiah Berlin Fellow at St. Antony's College, Professor of European History and author of this book, Homelands, A Personal History of Europe. Giovanni Orsina, from LUISS, Dean of the School of Government at LUISS and a Professor of Contemporary History at LUISS. And over here, the aforementioned Lucia Annunziata. Come in between our friends, Lucia. Lucia has been chair of RAI. She had a program for decades called In Mezz'ora, in half an hour. She has done Huffington Post. She now, like me and Giovanni, actually writes for La Stampa. Whenever she writes for La Stampa, I wish I'd written the same thing. So we're delighted to have you all. And we are wanting to try to talk about the future, but of course none of us knows about the future. But we want to use history to illuminate the future. And I particularly want to start with Italy's position in Europe and the idea of itself as a participant in the European community. Perhaps start with you, Giovanni, and then we might ask the view from the Englishman next to me. How does Europeanness play in, as it were, Italian politics, but also in, as it were, Italian identity? Do you see, and how should we understand the way that that has evolved? And therefore, you will indicate how it will evolve in the future.
All right. Yeah. Oh, first of all, thank you for having me here. Italy has changed a lot vis-à-vis Europe in the last, say, 20 years at least. After the collapse of the so-called First Republic, after Tangentopoli, 1992, 1993, in the late 90s, there was a perception that was very strong, above all, to the left of the center of the Italian political system, that Europe would be the answer, Europe would be the solution. Becoming European or adapting itself or modernizing and following the blueprint of Northern Europe is part of Italian history, is what Italians, I mean, the Risorgimento is about that. The Risorgimento is about becoming European, and that has remained a very deep element in Italian history. And in the 1990s, the idea was that the European Union, the Euro, would be the way to finally solve the problem of the relationship between Italy and the European models, or the Western models. That didn't work. Quite simply, that didn't work, because the Euro and the building of the European Union was not a solution to Italy's problems, meaning that, of course, there was much more that Italy should do itself to re-enter into that framework. And the moment when this relationship broke down was with the sovereign debt crisis in 2011 and Monti's government. That's the moment when Italians realized, well, you know, this might be a solution, but this is going to cost us a lot. And, well, given that the cost is going to be very high, well, maybe we don't want this solution.
But sorry to interrupt, I should remember that a decade before, whenever it was, 1999, when Italy was joining the Euro, you were the only country in Europe that actually introduced a special tax to be able to get you into the Euro, and it was even popular, which is not a normal habit. Popular taxes.
In that moment, that was seen, that was imagined as, well, you know, this is, you know, our last step, and then after this, everything is going to be solved. It was not. Then there was, to be very, very brief to complete the history, then there was a moment in which Italy, I think the most tense moment in the relationship between Italy and Europe, the Monti government, the explosion, electoral explosion of the Five-Star Movement, then the League. That was the moment, I think, the lowest point in the Europeanness of Italy. And this brings us to today. And today, I think Italians are just very pragmatic. They don't believe that Europe is a solution. They don't think that getting out of Europe is a solution. They are in a wait-and-see position, and they're going to play it very pragmatically. If Europe is able to solve things, we are going to, you know, play it along. But I think that in this moment, if you ask Italians, the answer would be, you know, we neither like it nor dislike it. It's an instrument. Let's see how it works.
So, Timothy, I mean, how do you see it? I mean, it's always seemed to me that a political goal for Europe has always been to be at the table in Europe, to be, you don't want the French and the Germans to run everything. You were even reasonably happy when the Brits were there, because it then meant you could be four big countries. Now it's obviously a different scene, but the French and the Germans are not as bound together as they used to be. What do you think of as Italy's role in Europe and attitude?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to talk about Italy's future as a historian who is the specialist on Italy, so I'm perfectly qualified to do that.
Excellent, excellent.
And I would pick up exactly from what Giovanni said, because that's precisely my impression from outside. I mean, the contrast between 20 years ago, where my Italian friends had a milieu in a magazine called Italiani Europei, all one word, right? It was absolutely, Europe was everything, and the position now. But the interesting question is Italy exceptional in this? Or is it part of a broader phenomenon? I mean, actually, we spent the whole day talking about Italian exceptionalism. And, you know, the thing is, every European country thinks it's exceptional, and the others are normal. So in that lecture we've been talking about, he says, Italy is exceptional compared to France, Germany, and England. And in Germany, they say, Germany is exceptional by comparison with France and Britain. And in Britain, we say Britain is exceptional by comparison with normal European countries like France and Germany. So everyone is exceptional. And in this case, I think Italy is not so exceptional. In connection with this book, which you very kindly puffed, I've been in 20 European countries last year, and basically there are three kinds of European country. There are countries like Ukraine and Moldova, where there is absolute passionate Europeanism. Every second word is Europe. Europe means freedom, democracy, peace, prosperity, happiness, and good food. It's everything. There are a number of smaller European countries, like the one in which you live, Ireland, Estonia, Portugal, often smaller countries on the periphery where people are still very optimistic about Europe and very pro-European. Europe is very good for them. And then there are what I might call the classic West European countries, the founding member states of the European Union, Italy, Germany, France, the Netherlands, all of whom are in this much more skeptical, much more morose, much more transactional frame of mind about Europe. So you could say exactly the same thing about Germany or France or the Netherlands. I mean, that's, I think, where they are, and that's where the argument is the same argument in all countries. To your point about the leading group, I would say there is an empty chair in the European Union. We, very kindly, the Brits, very foolishly, vacated it for you. The European Union does not work well when it's just the Franco-German couple. Actually, the Franco-German couple doesn't work very well when it's just the Franco-German couple. I like to say it's the opposite of Lady Diana's marriage. You remember Lady Diana said there are three of us in our marriage, it's a bit crowded. But actually in Europe it was a ménage à trois, which made the whole thing work, the ménage à trois between Germany, France and Britain, because it made all these internal balances. So there's that empty seat. And interestingly, when Mario Draghi was prime minister for that sadly brief period, Italy played precisely that role. These were the three leading countries, and it actually, I would say Ukraine would not be accepted today as a candidate for EU membership had it not been for Draghi. Draghi was the first to embrace it. He persuaded Emmanuel Macron, and then on the train to Kiev, they persuaded Olaf Scholz, right? Yeah. So there is that position for the taking.
Lucia, do you think that Italians would want to take that position? What is your interpretation of where Europe fits for the political class now?
We certainly have a leader, a prime minister who would like to play this. I think it's a dream on her part, but not due to her incapability. I think it's due to the fact that it's technically impossible. I would like to, why is it technically impossible? Because I think that Europe is in a shambles. I think from here, you don't understand the mess Europe is into. And the mess is due first to the issue of the war in Ukraine, which has shaken up Europe much more than what people say, because of course when there is a war, the first instinct is to deny that you have fear, or to deny that things are changing. And of course, the war in the Middle East also is very important. Italy and America are virtually, and Europe in part, but at the moment that the willing of this umpteen willing coalition entering and intervening directly in the Red Sea is matter fact done by American and Italian and a few others. And I would like to remember everybody that even though America all this time has played wisely with other countries that, made war for her, this time after Afghanistan, this is the first time America enters a situation of war. And the Red Sea is the only place that on the map join the West and the Ovest. If you control the Red Sea, geopolitical people are always very capable of creating a new word. They call this the competition for the Big Blue.
The Big Blue.
Yes, the sea. So America is still the major power, naval power. But China has become now for a long time desiring to be the other of the other. Now, the stream of harbor, especially on the street, what they call the choke point, is exactly the same geography that China aspires to control. So I think that the war up to now in the Middle East, even though it's regional, and the war in Ukraine, you know more than me, but we have talked about many times. So there's still two wars that affect mainly Europe. And now we have the complication of Italy saying yes to a war operation that, among other things, the government does not want to bring to vote in Congress. Because they say, alla italiana, sorry, oh, but we have two ships already in the Middle East. And we had one, we changed the name, we coordinate, we don't need to have a permission for this. So when I talk about the impossibility of Meloni to take this place, it's because it's at the moment not absolutely for anybody to take. Nobody would like to have anyway. So you have seen the new government, the new prime minister appointed by Macron. Obviously, it has to do. It's a confession for Macron that he's finished, because he's bringing in a very new, young, woke prime minister that is going to run probably for president. In Germany, I don't know, Germany has done a fantastic thing after having preached all of us, and then I finish on this, having preached to all of us that we had to be absolutely rigorous in managing our budget. They have taken 66 billion from help, from the European help for COVID, and they have taken off the national budget. I mean, really, this is a very Napolitan thing to do, not German. But, if I were a German, I would say, what would you want? This is Napolitan. Well, this is Scholz has done this thing. So Europe is, Sanchez not doing well, it was the government that went under. So I think Europe is very much under control, out of control, not in a dramatic sense, but in the sense that there is no more a line you have to adhere to be part of Europe. It's, when there is war, nobody changes government. Nobody asks, do you think that, the Ursula von der Leyen, who is trying to get re-elected, came to Rome and said to Giorgia Meloni, you should do this, otherwise Italy would not take a good place in Europe. They don't say anything. They kiss each other. They say, everybody says, well, let's hope for the best. So the situation in Europe is much more dramatic than what you think, because there is the effect of war that people, especially the government, don't want to accept. One more observation, this revolt by the peasant is the most important European movement at the moment. And God save us from those people. They are angry. They have been angry for years. They are angry at everything we're doing. They don't have money. The green the transition is a big problem for them. They are really angry. This is what is happening in Europe. This is why people like the right in Europe and the right in any other government of Europe has been successful.
Well, we hope, yes. It's true that Dublin has been blocked by tractors as well, relatively recently, as well as Paris. But let's...
By Italy, Germany.
Yes, no,
Okay,
of course, it's a
yeah.
widespread. No, I agree, it's a widespread issue.
I think I want to say this, you know the country that gets more money for agriculture in Italy, in Europe, by the European government? What?
France.
No.
Spain.
No. Orban.
Hungary. Well.
That's how we keep at bay Orban. We pay and pay and pay. È chiaro?
Now, rather than Viktor Orban for the moment, let's talk about a much more sexy subject, the Italian Constitution. No. But
I leave it to you.
The reason obviously we need to talk about the Constitution because it's a current political issue. But also what's clear if you think about the history is that there's been this constant tug between, an itch to change the Constitution, for one, but also in that itch, if I mix the metaphor, to a tug of war between centralization, more power for the Prime Minister, abolition of levels of government and so on, versus localization, more regional autonomy. Now the autonomia differenziata, as we were hearing about today in our conference. This tug of war generally has led to neutrality, if you like. Tugs of war often just lead to no change. So, Giovanni, how do you see this tug of war? Is this a tug of war over a genuine problem? Or is it simply the way regional and local politics work? And of course, we think of Italy as being a very local country.
Yeah. Well, really the sexiest topic. Okay. And as a matter of fact, one of the arguments is that the two issues should stay together. That if you have greater regional autonomy, you should also have a stronger central power directly elected. I mean, of course, the model here is the American model. So you have got federalism, but also presidentialism. So the two things are, in a way, conducted together, but of course, this is also a theoretical way to cover what is essentially a political conflict between two parties in the current majority. The League, that is connected, of course, to greater regionalism, and Brothers of Italy, who would like to have the direct elected prime minister. The problem here, as far as I can tell, is that here, making prediction about the future becomes particularly complicated because about autonomia differenziata, no one has really been able to explain to me what this will be and how it's going to happen and what are the conditions, whether there's the money, the very famous livelli essenziali di prestazione, LEP, that was also very unclear. So I think for the moment being, this is more of a propaganda issue, even though, of course, if it goes on, then it will arrive somewhere. Now, please remember that this was allowed by a constitutional reform that was introduced by the center-left. And this is not just a matter for the League and the regions governed by the League, but also for Emilia-Romagna. So this is not entirely political. And it is also very unclear what's going to happen with the reform of the Constitution regarding the direct election of the Premier, because the current proposal was very weak. And now it seems that they want to change it, but again, political struggle has entered in, so it's not clear whether they're able to transform this proposal. And even though they are able to do it, then whether this will arrive somewhere is another major question, whether the government will be ready to face a referendum about this. So this is very, very, I think, in this moment, there's a lot of tactic, a lot of politicking, a lot of quarrels, and in this moment, I think this is very, very unclear. So the topic already was not very sexy, and what I said is even less sexy than the topic. I'm sorry about that. I leave sexy matters.
Tim, I mean, looking at it in a comparative sexiness context, this tug of war between the center and local, you see it all over Europe, and also sometimes these calls for the directly elected leader. I mean, would that horrify you to see a directly elected Prime Minister in Italy?
So two things here. First of all, I would be very alert for what we've seen in Hungary and to some extent in Poland, exactly, which is attempts at state capture under the motto of constitutional reform. So that's something I would look out for, like the plague. Secondly, localism versus centralism is one axis, but the other axis is regional inequality. Right. So in the case of Italy, north-south, in the case of this country, south-north, right? And you can have a highly centralized country and extreme regional inequality, which is the case of Britain at the moment. The poorest 20% in this country, mainly in the north, are poorer than the poorest 20% in Slovakia. London is a very rich city. So highly centralized, but high regional inequality. Or you can have strong localism and much less regional inequality, which is the case in the old Federal Republic of Germany, because in the constitution it says between the Länder, between the federal states, there should be gleichwertige Lebensverhältnisse, living conditions of equal value. So I would be very strongly in favor of a reform, and I think Giovanni touched on this, which strengthened localism and regional self-government, because that's always good for countries. It gives more initiative, power closer to the people. It addresses distrust in democracy. So long as you have something like a genuine federal structure, which ensures that it doesn't lead to even more regional inequality. And my concern about so-called differentiated autonomy, in as much as I understand it, is that it would actually end up further accentuating regional inequality.
Lucia, do you have a sense of this?
I am completely against. There are few things of this government I am completely against, but this is the number one, you know. There are things I'm not happy about, like the cultural war that is burning in Italy, the equilibrium of power, whatever. But I think the decisive point for the government and for us, for Italy, the redefinition of Italy, will go through or won't, depends if they achieve it, the passage of this reform for premierato, which more or less is the English model they want. For one simple reason, Italy has, now it's very long, but he says something about this. He mentioned that from 2011 to basically the vote that brought to power the right, Italy has had six premiers, 7 governments. 4 of them didn't even pass through election. They were appointed by the president. And the other 2, they were like Letta and Renzi, were not personally elected, but the party was elected. And they themselves were picked up. I know, I've written a book of 600 pages. He also was nice enough to have me presented here. So the story comes out as a story of vanishing the very structure of the institution. No constitution, because the constitution at the moment is still there. There has been no major reform. The institution, the way they are, the 2-step, parties, Congress, Premier, and presidency, has been completely destroyed. First, in the first part of the decade, there was growing, I'm not saying abuse, but overuse of the president, on the side of the president of the country, on politics. Napolitano is a great president. I respect him very much. But now I say something that from up there is going to really makes me, he's going to say something bad from up there tonight. He will come to visit. He was a communist. And this type of communism, I'm left, came from a communist family, I'm authorized to do this. Came from that type of communist who believes that voter was too complex a practice for people,
Right, right.
We all know that. And Napolitano, that was revered, and there was every possible reason to do this, because Napolitano really governed Italy on the brink of disasters. Because when Berlusconi left, and I'm not a friend of Berlusconi, even though we had a fantastic meeting, a reciprocal pardon at one point of our political
Between
career.
you and Berlusconi, really?
Yes, really.
Oh, did you? Oh.
Yeah. Well, he called me after 5 years. I arrived there a little bit tense, He lives in a huge palace with he has a living room with 3 fireplaces and 30 sofas, something like this. I arrived there, was like, and I said, President, are you still angry at me? He said, no, that was good. It was good for you. It was good for me. All of us, we have done both our own job.
It's true. I had a similar encounter with him when I actually met him when we were filming, and I said, because he had put, or his newspaper, Il Giornale, had put my photo on the front cover, proving that The Economist was really called the E-Communist, based on the fact that I look like Lenin. that I look like Lenin. So I said to Berlusconi, do you still think I'm a communist? And he said, oh, no. He said, we were each playing our part. That's exactly.
But it's fun, this is fun, the sense that, everybody plays the card, and then you see the result of it. It's a little bit free market in politics, And so I'll just shortly say that after, I don't condemn, it's a sensible issue today, even today, I think, speaking about Napolitano, when he died, you could see I went to the Congress to see how they were talking about him. And it was like one of your lovely mystery, The entire Congress was completely silent. No hurrah, no sorry, not a word. It was done just out of respect, And so it was, and this was the government, the new government, of course, because the former government was a different thing. But what is important is that even Mattarella's done that.
Yeah, no, the role of the president's clearly been elevated hugely.
Exactly.
Under these two
also, both of them have been re-elected. Now, 14 years, none have done 14 years, but it's pretty much, a royal family. I don't think Charles III would last 14 years, probably, So it's a very long time. Now, this dysfunction was an illness that was due to the fact that the power of the party disappeared.
Yes, the power of the disintegration of the party.
The disintegration of the party. The point is that something must be done, but cannot be this reform, because this reform will do just one more thing. There are 3 levels of destitution. The party disappeared, the Congress disappeared, because the party are not able to have election that makes sense. The premier stays, and the president will go. So we have up to now 4 levels of the institution working between each other. And finally, if we have this, we will have just one level, it will be Georgia, and this Georgia dream. And by the way, I have to tell you one thing. It has nothing to do with fascism, because Georgia is a vita per onum. I'm not joking. It's a fascism of post-war, it's a peronismo, it's a io ti salverò, I will save you. You remember the Scamisados? You have been treated badly by the elite. The elite in this case, obviously, it's people like me, like journalists, we already are elite. I mean, we are talking about nothing really. But you have been mistreated, people are not help you, only public administration get money while during the COVID you had no money. I mean, all these things, and then say, but that's why we're here. And that's Georgia, I'm going to save you. I mean, this is what is working for Georgia. She could have the premierato, she would probably get it, I'm afraid of so, and that would be another Italy. But let me tell you one thing, Giovanni, this will be a bad day when she will have this reform, because with the institution reduced like this, it would be a very, very problematic moment for governing Italy.
So that's very fascinating. Let me just go above politics to demography, to aging a moment, because we've touched on the aging of the society, and in a way, the significance of Giorgio Napolitano was also a reflection of the role of such an elder figure in Italian politics. But my privilege is to have two countries that I love and study a lot. One is Italy and the other is Japan, and both of them are now among the most elderly countries in the world.
Well, you like Italian food, that's the product. A lot of people live long, in Japan and in Italy.
And I like Japanese food too, exactly. But all my taxi drivers in Tokyo are over 80 years old now. So in terms of the as Giovanni said, we don't know the future because we're historians, but demography is the one quite predictable element. Migration will influence it, but only over the long term and at the margins. The shrinking of your population, the aging of the society, is this something that political scientists and historians are going to have to focus on in Italy? What are they going to think? How will Italy adapt to becoming, in a way, Western Europe's at least oldest country?
Mm-hmm. No, I'll try not to be too pessimistic on these because already, Lucia, above all, on the international scenario has been. Now, normally, I am the most pessimistic in any group, but here Lucia is taking that place. So I'm trying not to be too pessimistic. It's very difficult to, of course. There was this, the Censis, the Italian well-known study center on society, and came up with this metaphor in this last report that Italians are sonnambuli. They are sleepwalkers because they are entering into a number of issues and problems and historical problems, and they try not to think about that, so like sleepwalkers. Which is, I think, part of the story. I think it is quite correct. That are quite relevant things about which in Italy we do not discuss. I think also because somehow the public opinion has grown tired of discussing things that don't seem to have solutions don't change. So there is a major issue there. And this is, I think, part of the reason why the Italian public debate is so poor, because I think it is very poor. Certainly demography is one of these points. This government, of course, has a number of ideas. Of course, the idea of encouraging the family, encouraging the creation of new Italians, but we all know that any kind of demographic policy needs a lot of money. And Italy, quite simply, does not have a lot of money. So you can work at the margins. You can invent a few things, but you cannot do anything that is really, really important. The other issue, of course, is migration. Migration, it has already been said in the previous panel, is electorally a no-go. So you must be very careful about that. You can say something about legal migration, and quite surprisingly, Meloni has said, we need more legal migration. But the problem also there is that, of course, we need more legal migrants, but legal migrants will be a solution for our demography in the long run. And someone sometimes said that in the long run, we are all dead. I mean, so the problem is, of course, not that migrants will be a solution in the long run. The problem is how do you cope with migrants that are a problem in the short run? And how do you convince Italians to buy migrants in the long and middle term as a problem because they're going to be a solution in the long run? And how do you make Italians buy migrants in the short term? You need a lot of money.
Yes.
Guess what? So you need a lot of money to integrate migrants in the short to medium term. You need a lot of money to have family policies that are going to not revert, because it is impossible, it is slow down the demographic decline. You don't have money, so in any case, you're faced with a major problem, and that's the reason why Italians enter into the problem without solution, sleepwalking.
Tim, Italy is the most advanced, if you like, country in terms of aging population, but it's not the only one. And Germany has all sorts of forecasts of declining population over the next several decades. France has had pretty successful pro-natalism, whatever the right word is, natality. Pro-natalist policies, and same with Sweden. But generally, this is a shared problem, or a shared issue. Do you actually see it as a problem? I mean, obviously, we all want to live longer.
So what I would say is that Italy is like other European countries, only more so. That is to say, it is an extreme example of a shared European problem, and the only answer to this question is to make a success of migration. It's the only answer. I'm all in favor of people having more children, that'd be wonderful, but it's not going to make a significant difference. And how do you do that? Three things. You have to manage migration in a humane and legal way, which is extremely difficult, particularly if you have Lampedusa, just off the coast of Africa, because if you don't, your populations think it's out of control. And there's no accident that Take Back Control was such a successful slogan in the Brexit campaign. So in all European societies, it's that sense it's out of control. It's not the actual numbers, it's a sense it's out of control. Secondly, when people come, you have to integrate them. It has to become self-evidently possible to be an Albanian Italian, an Ethiopian Italian, a Ukrainian Italian, and so forth. And thirdly, you have to have a rhetoric of calm that conveys the sense that this is perfectly manageable. And what in all our countries, I'm afraid in Italy too, you have is almost exactly the opposite. You have lots of irregular, uncontrolled migration. Many of them are not well integrated, and you have a rhetoric of hysterical civilizational panic. Right? So we have to do the precise opposite of the three things that are happening at the moment. Manage it, integrate, and have a rhetoric of calm. And for me, that's the challenge for democratic parties of the center-right.
No, absolutely. I mean, the only thing I'd add to your venue, not a migration question, that you do, we also know that we need to persuade people to work for longer and not draw their pensioners early. But that is also politically extremely difficult to do. The difference between Japan, the reason I have 80-year-old taxi drivers is because so many more Japanese work in their 60s, 70s, and even into their 80s, compared with Italians, or French, in fact. But try to get elected proposing that, I would accept. But at least then more taxes are paid, and perhaps the money from that can be spent on assimilating migrants. Now, just as a very final thing, the time is being called by the gentleman in the corner there, and I respect that, except that I'm going to violate it briefly. So we have to connect back to Alessandro Passerin d'Entrèves and his lecture from 1947. And a great phrase from the lecture, which actually Andrea featured in some of the flyers and on the board during our conversation, was He said, authoritarianism, nationalism, centralization, demagogy, surely these are evils from which we may expect to be cured. And we've all concluded that no, the cure isn't there. We all still have these evils and everyone has them. But let me just, one quick answer from the three of you in observing Italy. How strong are the antibodies against these evils in like Italian life, Italian democracy, Italian constitution? We all know these evils are a problem. Giovanni, how strong are the antibodies?
I think they are quite strong. I think that democracy has entered into the Italian mindset, and I think that Italy is essentially a deeply democratic country. Of course, I mean, it very much depends on how democracy is not just a national thing, it's a systemic thing. It must work, it must deliver, and a country must be inside a more general framework that is democratic. So I'm not saying, that, the future is shiny. No, I'm saying that I think that in 70 years, democracy, or even more if we count liberal Italy, that was, in its own way, was a kind of a semi-democracy, very imperfect. But I think that this has entered into, and Italians have grown accustomed to democracy and freedom, and they will not relinquish it very easily if the general conditions are favorable.
Now, Lucia, very briefly, but you've said the institutions are basically falling.
Yes.
Would it be fair to say you think the antibodies are less strong then against
well,
this?
It's a little bit of a different issue, in the sense that there is one trait of Italian characters that everybody, that it's real what is going to work in favor of maintaining a democracy, which is the fact that in Italy, when somebody goes very well at the election, it's a god. It's a god for the first 10 months. It's less of a god for 15 months, after 15 months. And then the first things that goes wrong, and they say, oh my God, this guy doesn't know how to do. Italian, I'm saying something very bad about Italian. Those are the people that were the same amount of people was in the piazza with Mussolini. The day after, they were all having a partisan in their family. I'm saying something completely not politically correct. But this is an issue that people don't talk about, why Italians were saved by the fact that in 1943, the government just changed side. There is some pragmatism in Italian political life that would save us from everything. But, I remember when you were there, I think, many times, when Renzi appeared, he appears and, Renzi is so strong. He will last the entire legislation. Oh, no. It's going to last 10 years, 2 legislation at least. By the time he fall, everybody was ready to think that he was going to govern for 80 years. Believe me, this was the craziness and stupidity in terms of the lack of finesse of Italian people. On the other hand, and I finish here, we know that democracy are under stress all over the world.
Yeah.
And we know that there are many democracies. What is called the seduction of autocrat is working for everybody, including in Italy.
And including Renzi, who spends a lot of his time in Saudi Arabia these days.
Course.
But anyway, that was a low blow. I should have... Tim, do you have a last observation?
I think the antibodies are really rather strong, for all the reasons that have been mentioned, but also because I think Italians know that there are a lot of other things that are important in life, and actually have a sense of humor. There's a remark of Cavour's, which I love, when he'd done some very successful political maneuver and persuaded the French and Austrians to attack Piedmont, and he said, we have made history, let's go for dinner. And I thought that was a great Italian remark. And localism and regionalism and the family and all of that. So I think the antibodies are very strong. But can I just finish on this? Because we haven't mentioned one name. which is Donald Trump. I mean, we are in Europe are going to face an absolutely extraordinary historical challenge in the next year and a half, when Trump, and it's a probability now, certainly more than 50%, is elected president. We have Putin pushing forward hard from the east. We have the United States withdrawing from the west. And then the question of the whole of Europe will be whether our antibodies are strong enough and it actually does unite us, and not, as Lucia has been slightly pessimistically indicating.
Man, no, it's because I live in Europe. You just go by and you live in England. Actually, you live in Oxford. You understand these things.
Well, look, that's a very sobering note to also say, let's go for dinner. But let me thank very warmly Giovanni Orsina, Lucia Annunziata, and Timothy Garton for a wonderful discussion, and thank you all for being here this evening. Thank you.
And let me thank Bill Emmott for so graciously moderating these two terrific panels. Thank you, Bill Emmott. Thank you very much. Thank you, Brasenose College, Corpus Christi, and Department of Policy and International Relations. We're gonna end now a fantastic day, and this was for a lecture that was delivered 75 years ago about Italy. And still, I think we are here as an Italian community in a republic of education that is Oxford, a terrific place. Thank you very much. And for those that are speakers, guest dinner, please follow me through that door behind us and we'll reach Divinity School. Bye now.